Hello. So I'm really excited to talk to you about the elements of the parenting plan from the perspective of what are the issues that are likely to arise and what are the factors and topics that really need to be addressed before the parenting plan or before we make changes to the parenting plan. No matter what, we are going to be opening our mind to all the possibilities, things that can happen over the next few years, and we are going to consider them when we're doing the parenting plan. As to how to negotiate our particular decisions on those topics and issues, that will come in Module 5 when we're working on negotiating and problem solving. But for now, in this particular section, it's really important that I point out the issues so you can start to think about what to anticipate down the road with regard to each child. So with regard to the parenting plan, we want to look at quality of time with each parent as opposed to the percentage of time. And that has to do with attachment and being able to have a secure attachment with both parents. In the old days, they used to look and see, when they were making parenting determinations, they would look to see what parent did the child spend the most physical time with, and what amount of time had they spent before the separation. What was the physical amount of time they spent with each parent? And they used that to inform their decision-making process. Now it is well known that when we're talking about attachment, we're talking about wanting secure attachment, that child has a close interpersonal relationship with the parent, that they feel secure, that they have a strong basis for wanting to develop and they're able to function well. And that secure attachment, the variable isn't so much percentage of time, hours, physical amount of time, as quality of time. And so when we're thinking about all these different things, we want to think about the quality of time between the parent and the child as the critically important factor in making our decisions and working on through the difficult issues. Because a good parenting plan that adequately considers quality of time with each child is one that will facilitate healthy child development. There's no one single parenting plan that works, and none of the others do. There are a lot of different variations, and so if you want to think about a range of responses and as well as offsetting particular issues and the temperament of each of your children as well as their different characteristics, that's how we might take a part of this parenting plan, a part of that parenting plan, whatever we need to do to make it your family parenting plan. And we want to minimize exposure to conflict, increase quality time, minimize unwanted stress. The time with siblings is also important. Geographical distance is going to be one of the issues. Work schedules are very important to consider. And the way childcare is related to work schedules and parenting time. We want to look at the age and the maturity of each child. So their developmental stage may not be the same as their age, or they may be very mature intellectually, but perhaps they're emotionally less developed. That's a factor. Those are all factors that attorneys and judges don't necessarily consider, but if you and your co-parent can get on the same page with regard to those issues, then you can actually make provisions that provide for that child in your parenting plan. Special needs. Do any of the children have special needs? For example, a child with anxiety disorder or behavioral problem, they may require greater levels of structure and stability based on the needs that arise from that disorder or problem. So there's going to be a balance in that. Whenever a child has a special need like that, both parents are going to have some consequences there in terms of getting exactly the exact schedule they want. So we want to really be tuned into values and what provides stability and the most support for that child, but also for their routine, them being able to get their care. If they have a complex physical illness like diabetes or cerebral palsy, we need to consider times of treatment and all of those different things in the parenting plan. So it's a time of tumultuous change for kids already. What are the things they're concerned about? When children first learn about divorce, their mind goes to the ways in which their life is going to be impacted, and appropriately so. So they're supposed to be egocentric, and they will immediately worry about what school will they be in. Will they live in the same neighborhood? Will they be able to hang out with the same friends? Those are the kinds of things that ring true for kids, and so to the extent we're able to accommodate some of those things, the better. If they can stay in the same school, if they can make sure to see their friends. It's not always financially possible to do that, though, and so it is a balancing act. And if a child is not able to stay in the same school or the same neighborhood, we want to make sure we offset that with other things that do provide the child with some stability and certainty and well-being, to offset the stress that's going to come from changing schools or changing friends. Location of parents' homes relative to each other is another really important factor. Transportation between homes or from school to home. If parents live far away from one another, that's going to be a issue in terms of the number of transitions that are necessary or that can be permitted, in terms, not just in terms of how difficult it is for the parents, but also how much time do we want a child to spend in the car every day. I have clients who don't live very far from each other, but they live in LA, and it's an hour and a half between their homes, even though it's not a terribly great distance. So the distance between their homes limits the options, and while a child may be able to spend 2 consecutive weekdays with one parent and then switch and alternate weekends, in this situation in Los Angeles with the drive time, it wasn't possible to fit in those weekdays. So those are the kind of things that really influence our children and our own ability to balance all of the different aspects of co-parenting. So we want each parent to have a chance to take part in the normal routines of each child's life. So it's not good to have a parent who has the children all week and another parent who has them every weekend, because then the children who are with the parent during the week aren't going to do their homework during the week because they don't have any off time with their parent. They're with another parent on the weekends. So both parents need to have weekend time and regular time. Both parents need to be able to get kids ready for bed as well as get them up in the morning. Both parents need to have a chance to help kids with their homework. And because you each have different qualities, that's actually not only healthy in a lot of other ways, but it also gives them the best of both of you. And that's probably going to be the healthiest situation for them. But without knowing about your particular family, it's hard for me to give you specific ideas. But these are the kinds of things, whether it's special needs, medical issues, distance, living apart, whatever characteristics make your family especially unique. You may want to save those for our one-on-one meeting, and we can discuss them. And if I know what they are, I can probably come up with some solutions I've seen work in the past or that haven't worked in the past and give you some ideas. A lot of it has to do with expectations on the part of the parents. And to what extent can I trust this other parent to do the things that they say they're going to do? And to what extent can I trust them to put our child first? So that can be supported by looking at a history of the interactions between the child and the parent. It may be that they're doing different things with the parent now since separation than they did beforehand, because the schedules have changed and they're living in different homes. But if there's the quality of time with a parent that is the same, and parents have a chance to really coordinate having a part in each area of each child's life, that is going to be helpful. But again, when both parents work, we are looking at other issues that can influence the child being able to stay consistent. So work schedules. I work with clients who are pilots. That's a special circumstance because it's impossible to know, except on a monthly basis, what the parent's schedule is going to be. And if both parents are pilots, that's a whole another issue, right? So we want to make sure that we take the time and really look at what is the actual situation on the ground right now and what are there likely to be coming up over the next year or 2 years in terms of each parent's work schedule. So almost all parents and families have some really evident strengths, right? And those are the things we want to make the parenting plan make the most of those strengths and make the most of the quality time with each parent so they can share their greatest strengths with the child. So a child will have different, not just developmental characteristics, but also temperamental characteristics. Those are also worth considering when you're figuring out time sharing schedules. Temperament can be a big factor, and it is also one that comes into play when we're talking about child care providers. So each issue that I mentioned, it can be an issue by itself, but it also can be related to other issues. Most of these issues are interrelated. So as a practical matter, they all influence each other. And extracurricular activities is a big one. It's a cornerstone for a lot of different issues that arise. And the busy lives that children lead and that parents lead and the routines and trying to keep up with all these moving parts makes all of the different issues interrelated. So that's why we really want to take the time to look at each issue and each variable and see how can we get those to mesh. For instance, the distance parents live from each other also can impact the amount of sleep a child gets. In one house, maybe they get up at 6:55, in the other house they get up at 5 a.m. To make it to school at 7:30, they have to get up at these two different times because the parents live different distances from the school. So that is going to be a factor. That child is going to have a harder time getting enough sleep, not just because they have less sleep in one place, but also because they have different sleep. So what do we do, right? What can we do? We might want to have the child get up a little earlier in the 6:55 house. We might want the family to try and do a lot of things the night before so that they could sleep a little later in the 5 a.m. house and somehow work these sleep times together so a child has a predictable sleep schedule, which will facilitate healthy sleep. When there are siblings of different ages, this is always a challenge for parents who live together or apart. But it's even more challenging when you're single parenting within co-parenting and you have children that have to be different places at different times. We want to kind of anticipate those things and determine if there's a way that we're going to be able to cooperate with our co-parent on that, or if not, we want to know in advance in terms of decision making with regard to that particular activity. Same thing with holidays. Think about what's important for you and your family. And even though you shared similar traits and what you thought was important in terms of holidays when you lived together, probably now that you're living apart, different things arise. So it may be that now that you're separated, it's more important that you have a certain holiday because that's when parents come into town. It's the only time the children will see the parents. So look at the holidays afresh, right? And if you've already had a parenting plan and done some of the holidays, think about, was this the best way to have quality time? There are different things you can do. Some parents will celebrate a holiday twice, so Thanksgiving twice, and then just alternate who's on the actual day. Other parents will alternate holidays, and even years this parent gets it, and odd years the other parent gets it. Some families will say always St. Patrick's Day with my Irish family and Rosh Hashanah with my Jewish family. Whatever it is, you look at your particular characteristics, think about your values, think about the other parent's values and what's important to them. And you'll have to always consider those holidays. For instance, I have a client whose birthday is on Labor Day, and so their birthday trumps the holiday, and the other parent wanted to go away for that weekend, and it's just not going to happen because it's the parent's birthday. Let's think about all those things in advance so we can make provisions, like maybe giving that parent an extended weekend the next weekend. Family vacations, we want to be able to identify them as soon as possible. If it's any less than a month notice on a family vacation, it's going to be really, really hard to work out over time. And how much vacation time also has to do with how long they can be away from the other parent. Also, when we're talking about decision making, we're looking at religious training. We are considering, is scuba diving a safe activity? So there are different reasons for including or excluding activities. It may be that one parent feels that one particular activity is too expensive, and that then limits the whole family being able to do certain things. So we take our framework that we spoke about in the last lesson and try to figure out what is our goal, who gets to benefit from a particular decision, who's it going to cost, how are we going to determine if it's working. And those will be important for both routine decision making and significant decision making. We also want to be able to define what are the things that are significant, what are the things that are routine, because that is a point of conflict. One parent will make a decision even though both parents have joint decision making on a particular topic, and the other parent erupts because that parent didn't consult with them. But the other parent says, well, that's just daily routine decision making. And the one parent says, no, that's significant. You weren't allowed to make that without me. So let's just decide in advance what kinds of things, maybe figuring out extracurricular activities is significant. And let's put it in that list. What are the major decisions? Orthodontics, medical, dental, optometry, psychological, counseling is a big one. Obviously education, the kind of daycare or babysitters or before school and after school care, those tend to be considered significant decisions. Attending religious training, who will actually be there for certain events. So it could be that both parents aren't presumed to be there for a bar mitzvah, or, I don't know. But you want to think about who can participate in these different activities, and the after-school activities, and the different family events. Out-of-town field trips comes up a lot. So there are very specific decisions that, like, can a child have an ear piercing or a tattoo, or at what age can they have the ear piercing, or bungee jumping on vacation. These come up time and time again as issues, which then lead the whole co-parenting format to fall apart because it hadn't been thought of before, and in the moment it creates enormous stress for the party who, let's say, didn't agree or know about the bungee jumping, and it's not just one event. In that moment, it's like, I could lose my child, right? So these activities, they gain extra significance when you think about the fact that it's your own child and you didn't have any control in the decision making. That's why the things that seem little can be little, or they can be really big, and we want to consider them in advance. We also stipulate, what do we do if we can't agree? Let's set forth how we're going to make those decisions. Safety factors are one area that we absolutely want to have in place, because that goes to trust between co-parents. It also goes to being able to put certain, for instance, how old does a child have to be before they babysit for the other children? Those are really important issues in terms of safety, but also child development, and also can impinge on work and a lot of different things. So we know that every plan will need revision, and we want to say, well, what's going to make this absolutely need revision? And those are real distinct changes in circumstances. But no matter what, even without what look like big changes in circumstances, the passage of time is always a big change in circumstances. If it's 2 years or more, that's a huge change in circumstances. Most families will do their plan at 1 year and just look at it and for revisions. Now maybe they can just write on their change and each initial it, or do they have to go through their lawyer or a mediator or a counselor? Have all that in place, because all those problem-solving avenues need to be laid out. Otherwise, we'll go right to our attorney, and that makes it grow. So psychological functioning, academic performance, interpersonal relationships, all of those types of interactions, when somebody can go out on a date, when a child can go out on a date, living apart from a parent can also change the ability to engage in certain activities, for instance. So there is going to be change, it's unavoidable, but we maximize stability and continuity as much as possible, maximize access to familiar relationships, including extended family relationships. Predictability is really, really helpful. Timeliness is important. The less we have to wonder. Also, the more timely we can make decisions, the less likely we're going to argue about them and create more conflict through them. The availability of parents, we want to be upfront about our availability. No parent can be available all the time. Now you have different responsibilities than you had when both parents lived together, probably. So let's make sure we understand what's going to happen when dad goes back to work. That's going to be an issue if both parents aren't working at the time of the separation. If we come up with a parenting plan that isn't able to consider the other parent's work, we will probably need to have another parenting plan at some point that does consider work time, quality time with the children, and all of the things related to the parent's work schedule. We want to be very specific about empowering our kids, and that's actually something that we can set forth through the parenting plan by putting in place those things that help to give kids positive self-esteem. So we're going to be looking in that in Module 4, the emotional intelligence section goes into how can we promote positive self-esteem with kids. And some of that will have to do with the parenting schedule. You know, being able to be there to cheer our kids on for certain activities. Their ability to participate in certain activities and friendships, all those things are going to go to self-esteem and emotional intelligence. So typical controversies that come up, sleepovers at other friends' homes, practical matters like the role of an extracurricular activity in an already paid for after-school program, for instance, or whether or not a particular decision is, let's say, a sports-related decision and it impacts academics, and maybe the other parent doesn't feel it does impact academics. So those are the kinds of things we want to be able to work on together. So children who do well before divorce will do well after divorce. But we can make this easier for you and your family by having a plan in place that minimizes conflict, which is the number one factor in being able to make sure kids have a healthy childhood. look forward to the next section with you.